Note that the plan is this. See, and some of us, we've gotten through, and some of us are fed into individualism, you see, by saying, well, I got here back then of hard work, and my parents were down to the school every day to see that I was in school and so forth, and if all the other black families would do this, no, that's a mythology. That's total mythology. We educate a few of you to justify the mythology of individualism. You become the prime example that's going to be projected before all the black people say, well, see, through hard work and all for how this Negro made it. And you didn't make it because you didn't have it. Nonsense. Purely nonsense. But that is a part of the game too. And when you're being educated, watch that, because this is the setup, you see. And if you don't watch it, you'll come to believe it yourself. And I run into students already who have this belief, you see. But this system is set up in such a way that it will educate a few. It will brain drain a few, but the vast majority will get shoveled out of the system at the lower end. But but the shoveling out will say it is the result of some kind of deficiency within their personality. And when the people believe that, then they will believe more deeply in individualism. When, as I showed you earlier, the system at its restricted economic state could not afford to educate large numbers of them anyway. But it gets away with this kind of excuse, you see. And so there's a reversal here that is used, and therefore it's in the interest of the nation, in order to maintain its economic power, to educate a few and to keep the rest out. So don't be used. The other constant that must be kept, and that is the constant of definition. I can't get across this idea, I don't know why, I try to get it across how important it is to have the power to define. When you let another people have the power of definition, you're letting them have the power of creation. You see in the mythological Bible, the world being created in terms of images and words. Let there be light, let there be this, and there was this. It doesn't matter whether it was true or not. The essence of the idea is that definition brings about reality and brings into reality. The ability to define is to a good extent the ability to say what is real and unreal. And when you let another people define reality for you, then they determine what reality is. And consequently, when we as a people have given up our power to define, then we have really given up our power to defend our interests as a people. The other day we were doing a lesson in social psychology. I wish I could bring a textbook in here just to show you how these books are set up just to do you in. And the more you read, the more they do you in. That's why I say often blacks are educated into ignorance. They're made ignorant by the very education. And the audacity with which these books will do it to you, they just sit it right up there and say, look, this is the way we manipulate you. This is the way we control you. It's right there, very clearly. You go into social psychology class and it talks about persuasive communications. You see, it talks about establishing norms and how you get people to react and behave in certain kinds of ways. Why do people conform? And one of the reasons it gave, we conform, particularly in ambiguous situations, because if we don't know what's going on in the situation, we look at other people to see what they are doing, and how many of us have been in that kind of situation, and then we follow their example, and we conform then to their behavior, particularly if it looks like their behavior is the right behavior, brings about the right results. And it's a very interesting statement, because it appears it's simple, but on a certain level, it's a very deep kind of statement. Because of me, and so after they made this initial idea, then they talked about several experiments showing how this worked out, you see. How you could deliberately have one or two people who would define the situation differently and make people not believe their own eyes. I mean, where people were looking at physical things, two lines, and one line was obviously longer than the other, but because one or two people in the group said, no, they're the same length, many of them reached the same conclusion, showing the power of the influence of the group. And when I'm looking at this concept of definition, looking at other people for definition, it reminded me of something here. Often the people we look for to define the situation are the people who brought on the initial confusion in the first place, you see. And it's very interesting because when you want to manipulate people, and some of you do this subconsciously, and some do it consciously, one of the first things you do is to confuse them. Like, we've done that among each other a little bit, right? You confuse them a little bit, upset them, they don't know quite what to do, and then what do? I got the answer. I'll get you out of your misery. So therefore, the person who first puts you in your misery also becomes your authority for what? Getting you out. And of course, when they get you out, they're going to get you out in terms that will advance their own interests. And now we talk about the confusion, the lack of definition, that we have the robbing black people of history, the robbing of black people of culture, the robbing of black people of a basis for reality based on their own experience and so forth. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, a typical thing happens. We end up believing the people who lie to us most. And watching, you see this in personal behavior as well as group behavior. The very group that has lied to you, has rewritten your history, has enslaved your parents, has eaten you up economically in every other kind of way, is the very group you go to validate reality. And to validate what is real. And to validate what is true. And you're foolish enough to think that they are the ultimate validators of what is real. And you're foolish enough to think that they're going to give you a definition that's going to get you out of your misery. And that's why we rush to their schools and rush to sit under their feet and rush to, and where the greatest liars of all sit, that's the places we want to go first. And where the highest liars are, those are the degrees we're most proud of. And you write these papers and they make you quote these liars. Oh, you don't have enough references here. Fill the liars. But then if you go and get your own people, somebody you can't have to leave them because they are not accepted by the establishment or something like that, and the references that are related to your own, you're scared to put them in because, the liars don't recognize us. You see? And you'll see this reversal going on all the time. You see, where the confuser also becomes the authority. In fact, they confuse you first so that they can become the authority. You see, and it's set up and built up that way. And consequently, you will see us there going back to our original confusers. People who are defining things. And when people define things, and ultimately when you define, you end up serving the definition. You end up becoming the definition. When a white man calls a black man boy, he's not only calling him a name, he is creating a boy. The very calling of the name is a part of the creation. Because when he calls him boy, he relates to him as a boy. And as he relates to him as a boy, he begins to create a boy. And as the black man relates to the white man in terms of that definition, he habituates to that definition and ultimately comes to serve that definition. So consequently, you cannot let, and yet we have not removed since slavery time and the power of the European to define reality. And when you read these books, if you're not careful, and yet you spend most of your time watching in this college, what? Learning what? Their definitions. Memorizing them, committing them to your head and to your heart. And you wonder why you can't get out of the trouble that you're in. You see, you can't have to get out of it. You got to be able to step outside of the whole thing and have a whole nother foundation for looking at what's going on. You can't let your master give you the definition and then give you the critique of the definition because they're still with what? They're still within the same thing. So whether you are learning to critically analyze literature, you're still critically analyzing it within the context of the Eurocentric tradition. So you still have not escaped. You see, ultimately you have to step out of the whole critical thing and the whole other thing and use a whole other foundation. Otherwise, you're going to be defined in a way that adds to. That has not changed. Definition has not changed. And to a degree, the more you educate a black man in these institutions, and the more black people accept these definitions, the more they will stay within the confines of the definition. And therefore, there's no escape through education. The other thing domain of discourse. What we call the domain of discourse. By that we mean who chooses what it is important to talk about. What is news? That which comes on 7 o'clock in the evening? What is news? You ever thought about that? Who defines news? That's the domain of discourse. You got a group of guys and whoever that sits back every evening and say, this is news. Okay, and a lot of people, and they define it what we write in our the New York Times is the newspaper of record, right? What comes on CBS, ABC is what? News. If it doesn't come on there, then it's not what? It's not news. This is a control of the domain of discourse. What do you talk about when you come to these classrooms? Many people come to these colleges and they assume that what is in the college catalog is worth learning. They assume that it must be worth learning because of what? Because it's there. If it weren't worth learning, why would they put it in? You know? And then they also make the opposite assumption that if it's not in there, what? It's not worth learning. This is a control of discourse, control of the domain of discourse, where people now set what is important to talk about, what is important to learn. You see, when you open the book, I talk to my students in psychology. Every time I talk about something that's not in the book, their eyes glaze over. They put their brain into neutral and wait until I get back to psychology. You know, I tell them I'm always talking psychology. In fact, when I'm talking to you about something that's not in the book, I'm talking about that is the most important thing I'm talking about that day, at that moment. However, because you have accepted this book as the definer of what psychology is, you see, you're going to see what I talk about as being unimportant. And of course, what I'm talking about is how that psychology can be used for our advancement. I see students even get uncomfortable when I get at it. I talk to mixed classes, and you can see the blacks and the whites all are twisting and turning. Because, they're suffering anxiety. Isn't it amazing, though? You can talk about the Holocaust, you can talk about all of this all day, no problems. But if you talk about slavery, if you bring up anything to do with black people, often both black and white students are terribly uncomfortable. They feel as if now they're being imposed upon. But what good is psychology to you if you can't use it in your own interest to understand yourself? What kind of course is it that you take that is of no value to you as a people and ultimately is not of any value to you as an individual? And how can it be of the value to you if you don't discuss and look at how it can be of value to you, see? Whether it makes you uncomfortable or not. But often, you see, what we've done then is let these other people, and when you go to these schools often, you let the other people determine what it is that's important to talk about, and consequently then, they are certainly going to list all of the courses and knowledge and information that is relevant to their own advancement and relevant to maintaining their own dominance. And when you make the assumption then that if it's not in the book, it is not worth learning, you're going to see everything that's related to you, you're going to perceive is not worth learning. And therefore, the more educated you become, the more really ignorant you will become of things that are really important to your own advancement. And that is one of the reasons why many, many, many educated black people are of little value to the advancement of the black group and of the black race. As a matter of fact, one of the best ways of making them no good is to educate them. You see? Because they just can't figure out how to use what they know for the interests of black people. And it's a pitiful thing.